Okay, so I'm backing up a little bit to explain something. Whoa, who produces this kind of thing? Okay, the life of an academic is divided into 3 parts. You can see it on the pie chart up there. A third of what academics do is teach, and a third of what academics do is serve the university and help the university function by serving on committees, helping make decisions, helping the university run, basically. It may look like the administration of the university is making decisions on their own, but in reality, faculty are part of the administration, for starters, and a lot of the things that you see happening are supported by faculty. A third of what faculty members do is create knowledge for the rest of the world. A lot of the things that you know, and a lot of the research that is funded, and the experiments that are very famous that you know about, have come out of universities, right? And this is why when they say, for instance, the Stanford experiment that you can look up, it was produced by scientists working at Stanford at a particular lab, right? So that third that is research is part of a bigger system that goes up here, which is the system of academic publishing, right? And it's all intertwined and it all relates to you. So all of the knowledge that we have is not just faculty members of universities writing things that are automatically approved. It's part of a much more complicated system. So if you go here, you will find, let's pretend, for instance, that we are talking about the researcher Robin Dunbar, right? He is a faculty member at university, and he's a social scientist, and he has produced what is probably the most current and important social science research on the question of friendship, right? And so how did he manage it? Well, he managed it by launching a large-scale experiment, probably with hundreds of subjects, and a research team that is considerable. And he was given this money to be able to conduct this research because the university trusts him a lot. And so Robin Dunbar produces this research according to the scientific method, right, that we've all agreed to as academics all over the world, and he writes it up. Okay, obviously there's careful documentation throughout the experiment, and there's a lot of awareness of the ethicality of this experiment throughout. And so he submits it to a journal. What is a journal? Well, a lot of the journals that we have are affiliated to either private publishers like Elsevier or university publishers, for instance. So which publications does AUC have? Well, I will name, and I need you to find 2 others. It's Aleph, Journal of Comparative Poetics, and it is housed under the Department of Comparative Literature, right, at AUC. So what are these journals? These journals are the places where this kind of knowledge is vetted. So this particular journal, Aleph, Journal of Comparative Poetics, will have entries both in English and in Arabic, occasionally in French as well, and it'll all be around subjects that are literary. And so there's an editor who's a specialist on this topic, but the editor can't make the decisions alone. So what happens? There'll be what we call a call for papers. Now, this is an important term. This call for papers is usually published in places online where scholars are receiving emails either through a listserv or it's a website that's very prominent, for instance. And so you hear about this call for papers, and there's an issue. So there's a thematic issue where all of the articles in this particular issue of, let's say, 2022 of this journal are going to be on friendship. And so you say, I can do that. I'm researching friendship and I'd like the world to know about it. Why would I need that? Well, because your promotion and your standing within the academic community relies on how often you publish, the quality of your publications, and which journals published it, because journals are ranked, right? Not all journals are created equal. And so you submit your article to the journal. And then what happens to it? According to the chart up here, which I got from Biomed Central, the journal goes through the system. Is it part of the theme? Yes. Are the basics there? Yes. And so the editor takes your article, removes your name from it, and all identifying details, and sends it to peer reviewers. Who are these peer reviewers? Peer reviewers are other specialists, faculty members at other universities in the same specialty as you who know about this specific topic, right? And single blind is 1 peer reviewer, double blind is 2 reviewers. Transparent peer review is where people know who you are when they're reading it. Open peer review. So basically, The system that is called peer reviewing is somebody who's a peer, just like you. Blind means they have no idea who you are, okay? Open means they do know who you are, which can be awkward, but also has a lot of benefits. Those peer reviews can be very nasty sometimes. And then what happens? The editor collects the reviewer's recommendations. Sometimes peer reviewers are called referees, and they think about what is being said, and then they remove the name of the reviewer, obviously, and they send it back to the author. And usually the reviews are published without revisions, very unusual. Published with minor revisions, and the comments will be written. Published with major revisions, don't publish at all, right? And it's up to the author to revise and resend, and the editor takes it from there, okay? So this system is really important because not only does it produce knowledge, but the people who write do not get financially compensated, but it does improve their prestige within the academic discourse community, the academic community itself, and it does help with their promotions. So that is the currency that academia works through. And the byproduct is some excellent. So is there a format that all academic research adheres to? Pretty much. So an academic article will usually include these parts. First of all, title, very revealing of the content, sometimes very clever and funny, and I will show you in a second. The abstract, which you shouldn't read first, you should read in the end, but it appears first. And this is a summary, a very concise summary of what's in the article. So if you're going through a stack of 100 articles that you've bookmarked for reading because you're not quite sure if they're going to help you, you just go through the abstracts, right? But I'll tell you why the kind of reading that I'm talking about doesn't recommend that you read the abstract first. That was skimming, so this is deep reading. The next thing is the literature review. We stand on the shoulders of giants when we write. And having said that, every writer, every academic writer, needs to acknowledge who has already contributed to this discussion. On one hand, this shows that this researcher has done their homework and knows who the important people are in this discussion. On the other hand, they show the reader their genealogy, who they belong to, who are the giants on whose shoulders they stand, right? Because sometimes you ignore certain people because you disagree with their work, and sometimes you include certain people, telling the world, these are the people that I'm going to be building on. But also, so what Dunbar will do if he is discussing the social science of friendship, he will start by saying who else has done work in this realm and what gap, what they didn't research, and therefore this is the area that Dunbar is currently contributing to by shifting the state of knowledge, right? The next thing is the research methodology. So Dunbar has to describe his experiment. He has to say, I talked to 10,000 people over a period of 20 years, and I asked them these questions, and this is what they said. I'm not saying that's what Dunbar did, but I'm just saying your research methodology has to be convincing, it has to be suitable, and it has to have a large enough sample in order to become valid, right? If you've only interviewed 3 people from a certain country in a certain time, that's very limited, right? So how you did this. The next thing is the results, the data analysis, which we also sometimes call the discussion, right? How I analyze the data, you describe how the experiment went, what you found when you asked those people, what kind of results came out, and then you kind of summarize the results for the reader. And so therefore, Dunbar was able to conclude X, Y, and Z, right? You include your reference pages, which are a list of all the sources that you have used throughout, okay? And do all academic articles adhere to this? Pretty much, in one way or another. So this is the article I'm looking at, and I am using it mainly for its very fun title, okay? Okay, so journals are usually grouped together and owned by databases, right? And this database will be basically a company that owns a bunch of journals, sometimes within a theme and sometimes not, okay? And this is also usually written at the top of the article. If you look carefully, hold on, let me scroll down. The date of this article is August 2019, so it's fairly recent, and these are the authors. So this is a group of authors, and it's open access, so anyone can access it without a subscription. You do have subscription to all of these things through your AUC account, though. Dr. Jennifer Raff tells us how to read and understand a scientific article, and her first recommendation is to begin by reading the introduction and not the abstract, right? Why? Well, the introduction kind of tells you why this article was written in the first place and what kind of a problem it is trying to solve. The next thing she recommends is to identify, and this will happen in the introduction when you read word for word, identify the big question. The big question is never what is the paper about? It's what problem is this entire field trying to solve? And this allows you to enter any academic article as an outsider even, and understand what is happening. So what does Dunbar do? Well, Dunbar has a central question, and that central question doesn't come from his own mind alone. It comes from the fact that he is highly aware of his field and highly aware of what is missing, what we don't know. So I'm going to go to this article, It's Your Friends Who Break Your Heart, that appeared in The Atlantic on February 9th, 2022, and this is where it starts. It is an insolent cliche that our culture lacks the proper script for ending friendships. We have no rituals to observe, no paperwork to do, la la da 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 da. And the article is really interesting because it says that in general, we lack research on friendship. And Dunbar's contributions in that area would be very, very useful. Now let's look at this specific article. What is the problem that this field is trying to solve? This article is funny because it looks at fecal matter of people who went to Christmas dinners with their in-laws. Why Christmas dinners? Well, because Christmas dinners are usually very different in the quality of food that is being offered. These are rich, feast-like menus usually, and you were eating with people that you do not know, okay? The gut microbiota changes dramatically, and so this attractive picture, and yes, this is an academic article, I know it's hard to believe, but he says that it's really interesting because this is a control experiment for a time of the year where answering the question of changes to gut microbiota are perfect, right? We want to know what happens when you make this change, and this experiment, so that's the specific intervention, helps because it focalizes Christmas, and basically it asks, the Christmas season serves as a natural intervention of a sudden increase in contact with in-law family members to determine whether gut health could be implicated in mediating in-law-induced health problems. We performed an observational study examining the effect of visiting in-laws during Christmas on the gut microbiota composition. So these are the details of the experiment. The next thing that Dr. Raff recommends is that you summarize the background in 5 sentences or less. So when we read this, okay, this introduction again, we should be able in 5 sentences or less to identify what work has been done in the field to answer this big question before, what was the limitation of that work that allowed the authors to intervene with their experiment, and so forth. You have to identify the fourth thing that you need to do is to identify the specific question that the authors are trying to identify. I think that's what we've done. And then you read the methods section. Ta-da, here it is, methods, and look at the clever chart here that outlines Christmas. You need to be able, when you read the methods section, whether you understand 100% the methodologies that are being presented to you or the terminologies, well, you're supposed to make a chart of those, remember, in your annotations, to be able to draw a diagram for the experiment. Sketch it out anywhere. Use the sidebar on your PDF, use pen and paper. The next thing, you read the results section. So you've done this part, and then you read the results section. Pay attention to certain things, like the words significant and non-significant. What does significant mean? These have very precise statistical meanings when you do research. Go on to read the conclusions, and then you go back up to the abstract, and you read that very, very carefully. And that really helps. The last thing that you do before you close is that you research what people may have said about this research, right? You can check the citation count to see how many people have referred to this very research before in their own work and stood on the shoulders of this particular giant. But then you were able to better situate this research within the research of others, right? Some experiments come under very heavy criticism, which you should know about. When you look at the abstract, that you will find that the abstract itself is divided similarly to the article. So the goals of the research, how the research worked, its findings, and the value of the research within the field. All right. I really hope this helps you. I will see you next time in class, and I hope this flipped classroom works for you. Good. Goodbye.